perspective on news, including insightful interviews with elected leaders, newsmakers, and cultural experts. I want to thank you for joining us today. We have a great program coming up, but first, here are some headlines from our friends with FISM News.
For FISM News, I'm Samuel Case with your Washington Watch News Update. It's Friday, October 6th, and here are today's headlines. Well, as House Republicans sort out who will be the next Speaker of the House, Donald Trump is now throwing his hat in the ring. The former president telling Fox News he'd serve as a unifier while Republicans sort out a long-term solution, saying he'd only do so for up to 90 days. He's already received the backing of at least one Republican, namely Georgia Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Most Republican members in the House that I work with have been endorsed by President Trump, and they won their campaigns because they begged for his endorsement. Yeah. So I think President Trump is the right guy for the job. I certainly would love to see him be Speaker of the House. He's the man I support not only for Speaker of the House, but for President of the United States in 2024.
Now, Trump plans to visit D.C. next Tuesday to discuss plans moving forward, but it remains unlikely he will actually take up the gavel, as just this morning he endorsed Judiciary Chair Jim Jordan for the role. Posting on Truth Social, Trump said Jordan would be a great Speaker of the House and has my complete and total endorsement. And in other news here, the Biden administration is making a complete 180 this week in terms of the border crisis. Along with greenlighting the border wall construction in Texas, Biden is now starting to deport migrants back to Venezuela. That announcement came just a month after the administration expanded temporary protected status eligibility for Venezuelan nationals. Here's DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas with that announcement.
Just today, the United States announced its agreement with the country of Venezuela to repatriate Venezuelan nationals who do not take advantage of the lawful pathways and instead arrive irregularly at our southern border and do not qualify for relief.
That news only comes a day after President Biden also waived regulations to allow construction of a new border wall in Texas, despite a campaign pledge not to build, quote, another foot of wall. And speaking of national security here, a new Wall Street Journal report suggests the Pentagon is preparing to cut 10% of its Army Special Ops forces. It's being done in an effort to rebalance towards more conventional troops and also help alleviate recruiting struggles. Senior Special Ops officials, though, are speaking out against those cuts, saying they could put the U.S. at a major disadvantage against China. And finally, a little bit of international news here. For the first time ever, the U.S. military just yesterday shot down aircraft belonging to NATO ally Turkey. Here's Pentagon Press Secretary Patrick Ryder explaining what exactly happened.
Our forces had observed UAVs conducting airstrikes in the vicinity of Hasaka, Syria. Some of those strikes were inside a declared U.S. restricted operating zone. At approximately 11:30 local time, a Turkish UAV re-entered the ROZ on a heading toward where U.S. forces were located. U.S. commanders assessed that the UAV, which was now less than a half a kilometer from U.S. forces, to be a potential threat, and U.S. F-16 fighters subsequently shot down the UAV in self-defense.
Ryder described the shoot down as a, quote, regrettable incident.
You know, Turkey is one of our strongest and most valued NATO allies, and that partnership continues and will continue. So this is certainly a regrettable incident. But U.S. commanders on the ground did assess that there was a potential threat, and so they took prudent action in this scenario.
Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has since spoken to his Turkish counterpart about that incident to clear up any misunderstandings. And with that, those are today's headlines from FISM News. As usual, you can catch our full show tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, on our website, FISMnews.tv. We'll cover these stories and more in much more detail. Again, that website is FISMnews.tv. You can also find us on the FISM app as well. Well, with all that, stay tuned for Washington Watch with Tony Perkins. I'll be back on Monday with more news coverage. We'll catch you then.
From the heart of our nation's capital, here's Family Research Council President Tony Perkins.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to this Friday edition of Washington Watch. I'm Jody Heist, the Senior Vice President here at the Family Research Council, and your host on Friday. Delighted to have you joining us. What a week. What a week. What a week. I tell you what, it's been incredible. A Speaker of the House is removed in a motion to vacate, a battle now to see who's going to replace him. We have issues at the border. It's been an incredible week, and we want to catch up with you on as much as possible. So coming up on this edition of Washington Watch, we'll begin with the Biden administration being caught earlier this week quietly giving a green light for the construction of a border wall, something that they had long spoken against. And now the president is telling the press that he had no choice about it.
Well, I was told that I had no choice, that Congress passes legislation to build something, whether it's an aircraft carrier, a wall, or provide for a tax cut. I can't say I don't like it. I'm not going to do it.
So was there really nothing that this administration could have done? Or are they just trying to find yet another excuse that they think somehow makes sense? The border needs to be secured. I'll be joined here in just a few moments by Congressman Keith Self of Texas to discuss this. And speaking of making sense, or not making sense, depending on how you look at this, President Biden had this to say when asked about how Americans are feeling about the economic situation today.
I think they know they're better off financially than they were before. It's a fact. And all that data, all that polling stuff shows they think they're more positive about the economy than they've been, more positive about their jobs, et cetera.
All right, it's a fact. You really have more money in your bank account than you think you have. You're making more money than you think you are. And the cost of goods are a lot less than they are. That's a fact. Are Americans really better off financially today than they were before President Biden took office? Well, we'll be discussing this a little bit later in the program with former Congressman Dave Bratt, who is now the Dean of Business at Liberty University School of Business. And then we have some encouraging news to cover. Yesterday, the women's swim team at Roanoke College stood together to call on the NCAA to protect the integrity of female sports. It wasn't just one or two swimmers, but the entire team. And I'm delighted to be joined with one of the individuals who stood with the team yesterday, Paula Scanlon. She is now with Stand With Women's spokesman at the Independent Women's Forum. And while it is encouraging to see these young women stand up to a culture that's trying to ignore them, silence them, even erase them, what we need is more men who will stand up. So I'm thrilled to be able to join to conclude the program today and being joined by Dr. Owen Strachan, who is out with a brand new book entitled The War on Men: Why Society Hates Them and Why We Need Them. Friends, you don't want to miss it. We have a packed program coming up, tons of information, and of course you can always catch, if you miss any portion of it, at our website, tonyperkins.com. Also, tons of resources there available for you, as well as a host of archived programs as well. So don't miss that website, tonyperkins.com. All right, let's get underway for today's program. The Biden administration is now trying to change the media's narrative after they were, frankly, caught late Wednesday quietly giving a green light for construction of a border wall in Texas. Well, President Biden is saying he had no choice. But now DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas has come out trying to make it loud and clear that the Biden administration maintains that they do not believe a border wall does anything.
There is no new administration policy with respect to the border wall. From day one, this administration has made clear that a border wall is not the answer. That remains our position, and our position has never wavered.
Wow, this is just stunning. You wonder how in the world
do these people keep going? This administration now is flip-flopping, saying that they are still against a border wall. Well, should they be against a border wall? Well, joining me now to discuss this and much more, Congressman Keith Self is a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee as well as the House Republican Study Committee. He represents the 3rd Congressional District of Texas. Congressman Self, always great to see you. Welcome back to Washington Watch.
Thank you so much, Tony. I'm very hoarse. I spent an hour with the group last night, and I'm paying the price for it today.
Well, you are hoarse, but thank you, in spite of it all, for joining us. Listen, before we get to the border, Keith, we got to get a latest update as to what's happening on the speaker's election. Where do we stand right now with that, and what do you anticipate going into next week?
Well, we're being called back Monday to start conference meetings, and I will tell you, I think that it's going to be a very difficult time because the motion to vacate, which has been a part of our history since the beginning, it has been changed once. That was after Mark Meadows actually moved to vacate under John Boehner. So it was changed then. The Democrats actually changed it, so people are calling for it to be changed now. So I think it will be a centerpiece of the discussions going forward, and I think a centerpiece of the speaker's race will cause us to lose even more time. I'm calling for people to just get back to work. Let's get back to the appropriations bills and do our work so that we don't have an omnibus at the end of the year.
Yeah, listen, that is of such critical importance right now, and you're talking about the timing of all of this. That's what just creates a lot of angst with a lot of people, and I know with your colleagues as well. I understand that there's a group of about almost 50 now, 4 dozen or so, who are calling, Republican members who are calling for a change to the motion to vacate. Do you think that's going to gather more momentum?
Well, I don't know about the momentum, but remember, it takes 218 to change any of the rules. Now, we can change the rules with 218, but I think it would be disastrous for them to cross over to the Democrats, which I don't think would support it anyway. So I think the conference has got to pull together. We've got to come together. We've got to make the decision to move forward with our job, which is to fund the government, which is to get the appropriations bills passed.
Well, listen, y'all have got your hands full, and I want you to know so many millions and millions and millions of us out here appreciate it, and we're praying for each of you as you go back into session next week. If we can, Congressman, let's switch to the border situation right now. You being in Texas, you're on the tip of the spear with all of this. What do you make of the Biden's really the about face, if you will, about the building of the border wall there in Texas?
You just had 2 clips that were absolutely ludicrous. First of all, for the president to say he has no choice, the border has been lawless since he took office. He's not enforced one bill, one law on the border. It's lawless. He basically thinks the law is irrelevant. He thinks Congress is irrelevant, that he will do what he wants to on the border, which is an open border policy. And for Mayorkas to say that walls don't work, walls do work. I have always said, build the wall. We will back it up with other measures, but build the wall because walls work. We need a wall. Let's get to it.
Yeah, and I would imagine Mayorkas has some sort of barrier around his house. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. You know, it strikes me, as you said, though, that the Biden administration, are they really as powerless as they're trying to make themselves out to be, especially when you look at an untold number of issues that this administration has changed, has utilized and even usurped, in some cases, power and authority in order to push their policies forward. Are they really as powerless as the president's seemingly trying to portray?
No, absolutely. They have used their power to the utmost during his 2 years in office. They have basically done what they want to. They ignore whatever laws they want to ignore, and they do whatever they want to. I mean, this is basically, you want to talk about chaos. Many people talk about the Republicans being in chaos. This Biden administration is creating chaos across America. I mean, it is evident in every area, and that's why we have a movement growing today across America of frustration, of anger with the federal government. Pick your issue. Is it inflation? Is it spending? Is it the border? Is it the weaponization of the federal government? 18 cars pulling up in the middle of the night, breaking down your door, hauling you out, half dressed. I mean, pick your issue. But there is a movement growing of anger against the federal government. And I think they're starting to see the pressure, Jody, because they're starting to see that people are not now laying down as much for their bold actions as they used to be. People are starting to become awake, and I hope the movement grows.
Well, extremely well said. And, I've heard the analogy, the word picture before, that this administration is like arsonists. They set something on fire, and then when it's burning down, they come riding up with a water hose and try to claim themselves as heroes. But that's exactly what you're saying. It is an administration of chaos. Why do you think they are so opposed to the border wall?
Because they have an open border policy. They want to get as many people into the United States, believing that we citizens have a very short memory, and in short order, they will have more dependence on the federal government, that they will now control all of the welfare, all of the programs, and they will be so huge, we will never be able to get our $33 trillion in debt back under control. We have got to start whittling away at that $33 trillion in debt. And frankly, this year we're not doing it. We're just not going to be able to get there, Jody. But we've got to make the changes we can incrementally this year so that next year in a more secure conference, we can make better changes. We won't get there this year, but we've got to hold the line this year and until we can make more changes to get that debt under control, to cut the spending. I've heard talk of a debt commission. I would love to see a debt commission, much like the BRAC commission, where we would have a bipartisan commission to handle even mandatory programs and then bring it to the floor of the House and the Senate for an up or down vote. I hope we move to that because that's a good idea. Maybe its time has now come.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And again, what you just described is yet another example of this administration creating chaos. But I'm sure you probably heard coming into the intro, the president has said it's a fact that you're really better off than you realize. It's phenomenal how this administration ignores the truth.
It is, Jody. When you look at a 16 or 17% increase in prices for gas, groceries, and rent, and a 3% real cut in your wages, you're real close to a 20% decline in your quality of life. Our families are now paying $700, $1,200 more dollars every month just to get by. Middle-class families can't afford that.
They can't. Thank you, U.S. Representative Keith Self from Texas. Have a great weekend. Thank you for joining us. All right, friends, after the break, the latest jobs report is out, and the Biden administration is hailing it as a great victory for them. But is it just more smoke and mirrors? Well, we'll be discussing this and more after the break, so don't go anywhere. Stick around. We'll be back in just a moment.
Everything we do begins as an idea. Before there can be acts of courage, there must be the belief that some things are worth sacrificing for. Before there can be marriage, there is the idea that man should not be alone. Before there was freedom, there was the idea that individuals are created equal. It's true that all ideas have consequences, but we're less aware that all consequences are the fruit of ideas. Before there was murder, there was hate. Before there was a Holocaust, there was the belief by some people that other people are undesirable. Our beliefs determine our behavior, and our beliefs about life's biggest questions determine our worldview. Where did I come from? Who decides what is right and wrong? What happens when I die? Our answers to these questions explain why people see the world so differently. Debates about abortion are really disagreements about where life gets its value. Debates over sexuality and gender and marriage are really disagreements about whether the rules are made by us or for us. What we think of as political debates are often much more than that. They're disagreements about the purpose of our lives and the source of truth. As Christians, our goal must be to think biblically about everything. Our goal is to help you see beyond red and blue, left and right, to see the battle of ideas at the root of it all. Our goal is to equip Christians with a biblical worldview and help them advance and defend the faith in their families, communities, and the public square. Cultural renewal doesn't begin with campaigns and elections. It begins with individuals turning from lies to truth. But that won't happen if people can't recognize a lie and don't believe truth exists. We want to help you see the spiritual war behind the political war, the truth claims behind the press release, and the forest from the trees.
Good afternoon and welcome back to Washington Watch. I'm your Friday host, Jody Heist, Senior Vice President here at FRC, and welcome aboard. Well, the Biden administration would like for all Americans to believe that all is well, even though we are watching an endless stream of really self-inflicted crises strike the nation from all different angles. As you have heard by now, the new jobs report has come out, and the president, of course, is trying to somehow convince America that this is a great victory for him and for our country. But he was asked by a reporter this morning, why do Americans still not feel positive about the economy? And here's what he had to say.
I think they know they're better off financially than they were before. It's a fact. And all that data, all that polling stuff shows they think they're more positive about the economy than they've been, more positive about their jobs, et cetera.
I just had to play that again for you. You got it. It's unbelievable. Do Americans really believe that they are better off financially now than they were before President Biden took office? Well, joining me now to discuss this and more is Dr. Dave Bratt. He's the Dean of the Liberty School of Business and a former colleague, former member of Congress. Dr. Bratt, welcome back to Washington Watch. Always great to see you, my friend.
Great to be on with you, Jody, Congressman. Great to see you.
All right. Listen, did you know what the president just said? The economy's great. The facts are there. I mean, it is what it is. You have more money in your account than you thought you have. You're making more money. All is well. What do you think?
Yeah, no, actually, it's a very complex mess we're in right now. You get good news on a jobs report, but it's bad news for the stock market. And we're in pretty serious territory right now in the bond market, right? Everybody, you and I were, I was in the Tea Party 10 years ago groups, and everyone would ask me, Dave, when is all this going to come due? And I said, now, we're way past it already. But now, for the first time, the rest of the world is sending signals and evidence that they think we're going to default on the U.S. Treasuries, right? We're going to be $50 trillion in debt in 10 years. We're $33 trillion now. And in 10 years, the interest rate's 5%. We'll be paying $2.5 trillion just in interest payments. That's half the budget back when you and I were in there. And so the rest of the world knows we're not paying that back. And so as a result of that, the bond market is seriously getting very wobbly. The yields are going way up. That's a signal that they're having to offer more and more and more to get other people to buy the treasuries. The rest of the world, you guys cover this reserve currency issue. The U.S. has always been the stronghold, but now the BRICS, China, Brazil, India, some major superpowers are lining up to have a reserve currency against us because they know we're going to default, right? That is true. I'm an economist, 20 years. There's no way we're paying off $50 trillion in debt. So the question is, who gets the haircut, right? The rich who own, the top 10% of the rich own 90% of all the bonds, stocks, et cetera. So the Fed's going to, try to nip inflation right now, bring the economy into recession. But then after that, they're going to try to stabilize things at 5 or 6% inflation. And so to get back to your question, that's what's got everybody upset. If say you have inflation for 10%, 10%, and 10%, that doesn't mean the price level's up 10%. That means your meat and your chicken and your eggs are up 30% because you add the inflation together, right? It's not just 10, 10, 10, and that's 10. It's 10, 10, 10, and that's 30. And that's what the people are feeling. No one will explain it to them, but there's your pain.
Great point. And even beyond that, this whole jobs report is so flawed. I mean, it's most of these jobs that are coming back are jobs that were lost during COVID, and now they're coming back. And so the president's counting them as though he's creating these new jobs. But also beyond that, how many of these are second jobs that people are having to do because they can't pay that 30% that you're talking about? So it all just appears to me, not an economist, just to be a lot of smoke and mirrors.
No, well, there's a big debate out there. We don't know who's right yet because you got to trust these people, right? And trust is in short supply right now. There's two surveys, right? There's the establishment survey, which has it up at 370,000 new jobs, and then there's the household survey, which has full-time jobs actually negative, going down. And people that like this stuff got to Zero Hedge, right? They're funny and they're very smart. And Zero Hedge, they got charts on this stuff all day, every day. And Brat Economics on Getter, I post a bunch of charts. But yeah, most everyone thinks these numbers are overstated. The numbers always come in hot, and then they go down, 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 and they get revised.
Yeah, they be readjusted. That's right.
They're right.
And on top of all this, on top of this, the president keeps saying how he's reduced the deficit by 1.7 trillion. I mean, you just said, and I know too, we've exceeded over $2 trillion in additional debt.
Yes. And that's the piece I wanted to get to. It is true. The Federal Reserve is actually shrinking the money supply, M2, right? So they threw out money, $9 trillion. But now that the Federal Reserve is trying to bring it back down, but guess who stepped in to fill the void? The federal government. So now they're running $2 trillion deficits, like you just said. That's stimulative. That creates inflation. So now inflation's creeping back up, and this is not a real economy, right? If you're borrowing $2 trillion from your kids and creating jobs and giving everybody paychecks like we did in COVID, is that a real economy? Ask yourself. Is that a real economy? Right? If you borrow from your rich uncle and put $1 million in your pocket, are you a millionaire? No. And it's that simple.
Wow. Well, I wish we had more time, Dr. Brad. This is incredible. It seems like every week there's more and more articles indicating difficult times coming ahead, and Americans need to start preparing for that. But thank you so much for breaking this down in such understandable terms as you always do. We love having you on the program, and thanks for your incredible insight. So Dr. Dave Bratt, Dean of the School of Business at Liberty University, thank you so much for joining us on Washington Watch. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Congressman. God bless everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, friends, coming up, we're going to transition a little bit. We've seen lots of various female athletes recently stand up against males coming into their spaces, coming into their locker rooms, the showers, all that sort of thing. But yesterday, we had an entire team of female athletes took a stand. You don't want to miss what we're about to get into. Proud of what they did, and you will be too. We'll talk all about it right after the break, so stick around. We'll be back in a moment.
All of us are born with the desire to find truth and meaning. Where did I come from? What happens when I die? While our answers to these questions may divide us, we are united in our need for the freedom to answer life's biggest questions and make life's biggest decisions for ourselves. That's why religious freedom matters for everyone. Religious freedom matters because the powerful have long wanted to control those who are less powerful. Religious freedom matters because the freedom of those who are different is often threatened by those who believe different is dangerous. Leah Sheribu, a Christian teenager in Nigeria, remains a captive of Boko Haram for her refusal to renounce her Christian faith. Chinese pastor Wang Yi is serving a 9-year sentence for speaking publicly against the Chinese government. All of this because people in power decided different is dangerous. At the Center for Religious Liberty at Family Research Council, we promote religious freedom for everyone because the only alternative is religious freedom for no one. We encourage Americans and the American government to engage and advocate for the persecuted, and they do. We work every day to bring good news to the afflicted, to proclaim liberty to captives and freedom to prisoners. We do it because that's what Jesus does. We work to give freedom to others because we ourselves have been set free.
Good afternoon. Hope you're having a great day. Welcome to this Friday edition of Washington Watch. I'm your host, Jody, Heist, Senior Vice President here at the Family Research Council. All right, as you well know, there's an increasing number of female athletes who are standing up to the woke mob. They are saying no to men in our bathrooms. No more men in our locker rooms. No more men competing against women in head-to-head competition. And I, for one, as a man, wholeheartedly support and echo their message. Well, one particular group of women has been particularly brave in standing together against men who are masquerading as women and entering into, trying to act as female athletes and enter into their athletic space. Well, recently, the women's swim team at Roanoke College, along with some other female athletes, took a united stand against men in their competition spaces. And joining me now by phone is one of those individuals, Paula Scanlon. She stood with the Roanoke women's swim team yesterday. She is the Stand With Women spokesman and the advisor at the Independent Women's Forum. Paula, welcome to Washington Watch. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me on today.
Well, you are extremely welcome, and we are grateful for your bold stand and for standing with the swim team at Roanoke College yesterday. Can you tell us about what took place yesterday?
Yeah, yesterday, so the Roanoke College girls broke their silence, and they talked about their experiences of what they went through being told that they had to have a man join their team. And the girls all stood together and did a press conference, and 10 girls, I think it was about 10 girls, opted to give remarks on what having a man on their team meant to them and how much it was harming their well-being, their athletic opportunity, and just their privacy and safety. And this is the first time I personally have seen a team come together and say enough is enough. And ultimately, the male athlete actually did opt to quit the team over the girls' stance, which is really great.
Yeah, that's tremendous. And it shows yet again, Paula, that when people take a stand, courage has tremendous impact and influence, and the fact that he stepped down, I think, is a huge indication of that. But you yourself also have been an incredible leader. When it comes to courage and this whole issue. You were on the University of Pennsylvania's women's swim team, and you were there likewise with so-called teammate, if you will, Leah Thomas. What was your experience with him?
Yeah, so my experience on the team was very much that the university told us that our opinions didn't matter and that one athlete, Leah Thomas, mattered more than the rest of us. And the Roanoke College girls also shared that same experience. My university told me that Leah being on the team was a non-negotiable. They told us that if we spoke against having to share a locker room and compete alongside against a male, that we would regret it for the rest of our lives, that we would lose all opportunities to eventually get a job. And ultimately, they told us that if we still had objections to Leah being on our team, we should seek psychological services and go to counseling to be comfortable with the idea of having a man in your locker room. They told us we needed psychological services and counseling.
That is just unbelievable. And you said the Roanoke women's swim team probably experienced very similar verbal lashing and intimidation, however you want to phrase that. So this type of thing is happening, as we all know, more and more all over the country. So Paula, what would you say right now to a fellow female athlete, whatever sport, but she is fearful to speak out against men who are entering into her sport? Now that you've got so much experience, what would you say to that athlete?
Yeah, I would say to them that I understand the fear. I was once in their position as well, but just know that most Americans agree that men do not belong in women's competitions. It's really challenging to take a stance, but bravery is always rewarded. I know for myself, this has helped me become a more confident person. This has helped me become more comfortable with sharing my own opinions. I used to, even when I first started talking about this, I was still scared to fully speak my mind on my issues. But now that I've started speaking, I've unlocked even more of my voice. And I know every other girl, if given the same opportunity, would do the same, and it would do great things for their self-confidence, for their rights, and for just the rest of their lives, and also for other girls who are going through a similar situation. It'll help empower them as well.
Well, you know, it's just amazing to me that we even find ourselves at this point in our society, that we are even having this discussion about men competing in women's sports and that men claiming to be women. The whole thing is so upside down, and the fact that people like you are standing up against this, Paula, we are deeply grateful, and just say thank you for all that you do and the courage you've inspired in others.
Thank you so much. It means a lot to have your support, and just continue to just share support to all girls. I think this is a fight for everyone. It doesn't matter who you are. Everyone has a woman in their life or a girl in their life that's going to be affected by this, so it's so important that every single one of us uses our voices and continues to speak up against injustice when we see it.
Absolutely, and we'll do. Thank you, Paula Scanlon, Stand With Women spokeswoman at the Independent Women's Forum. Have a great weekend. All right, friends, coming up, no pun intended, but I'm going to transition from the women's side to the men's side when it comes to the gender issue. Men thinking that they're women is just the tip of the iceberg. We're going to dig much more into this after the break, so stick around. You don't want to miss it. We'll be right back in a moment.
The world is hurting. Streets are filled with crime. Families are broken. Sin is celebrated, and God is mocked. Everywhere we look, the wages of our sin are on full display. As Christians, we know that surrender to God's will is the solution to our biggest problems, but not everyone agrees. Even in church, we hear people say the most important thing is to be tolerant, that we shouldn't impose our morality on other people, and that loving our neighbor means celebrating what they do. But you can't do that. It's not that you don't love your neighbor, you do, but you care about God's opinion more than your neighbor's opinion, and this makes you different. In fact, sometimes it makes you feel alone, like you're the only one. But there is good news. You are not alone, not even close. Research has found that there are 59 million American adults who are a lot like you. There are millions of people around the country who are born again, deeply committed to practicing their faith, and believe the Bible is the reliable Word of God. But that's not all. They're also engaged in our government. They're voters. They're more likely to be involved in their community, and they're making a difference in elections. The problem is that a lot of them feel alone too. We want to change that. FRC wants to connect these 59 million Americans to speak the truth together, no matter the cost. If you want to learn more about this group and what it means to be a spiritually active, governance-engaged conservative, or if you want to find out if you are one of these SageCons yourself, go to frc.org/SageCon and take the quiz to find out. The world is hurting, and we have the solution. We can't do it alone, but we can do it if we work together. That's what we're working toward every day. Join us. Go to frc.org/SAGECON, SageCon, to learn more. That's SAGECON, SageCon, to learn more.
I'm often asked by people, Tony, how do you stay encouraged? How do you deal with all of the stuff in Washington, D.C., the negative policies that are attacking our faith, our family, and our freedoms? Well, you want me to let you in on the secret? It's called the Word of God. And that is why the Family Research Council embarked on Stand on the Word, a 2-year journey through the Bible. It's a chronological Bible reading plan with just 10 to 15 minutes a day. In 2 years, you will have covered the entire Bible. And to go along with this, Monday through Friday, I do a morning devotional that goes along with the reading of the day. It's all designed to encourage you on this journey because the Word of God, as the psalmist said, in my affliction, here's my comfort. Your Word gives me life. That is our source of strength. To find out more, go to tonyperkins.com or frc.org/Bible. And I invite you to join me every morning for our Stand on the Word Bible.
FRC celebrating 40 years with Congressman Randy Weber.
Well, for the FRC staff, kudos, hats off, all of those kinds. I can't say enough good things. Y'all are helping hold up us during the battle. I know it's got to be daunting. I know sometimes it gets wearying. Sometimes you think, I'm not sure. Stay the course. God bless you. We're praying for y'all. We love what y'all are doing. Please, please know you are loved and appreciated. If it weren't for y'all in FRC, we couldn't do what we do. So thank you for that.
And thank you, Randy Weber from Texas, one of the great representatives from the great state of Texas. We appreciate those incredible comments, and what an honor to be able to celebrate 40 years of the Family Research Council. I'm your host, Jody Heist. Welcome back. It's an honor to have you with us this Friday edition. All right, I'm sure all of us have heard multiple terms like male chauvinism, toxic masculinity, mansplaining, and there's a host of other things. But increasingly, the left and the liberal elite, they've been demoralizing and even demonizing men who show any signs of strength whatsoever. And as a result, men these days are much less willing, it seems, to take a stand up or to step out. And as a result, quite frankly, we have weaker men. For crying out loud, we even have men these days who think they're women. And that type of thing leads to a plethora of consequences, as we are certainly witnessing through our society. So what's behind all of this? And where is this going to lead us if we continue down this path? Well, joining me now to talk about this is Dr. Owen Strachan. He's the author of a new book, The War on Men, Why Society Hates Them and Why We Need Them. In addition to being a senior fellow at the Family Research Council Center for Biblical Worldview, he's also a provost and research professor of theology at Grace Bible Theological Seminary. Owen, welcome back to Washington Watch. Great to have you.
Thank you so much. Great to be with you. I appreciate it.
Well, let's just begin. There's so much happening these days with men, but just kind of hone in for us. What inspired you to write this book, and why now?
Yeah, fundamentally, recognizing that men today are called toxic, as you alluded to a minute ago, means that an adult man like me can hear that and can kind of shrug it off and laugh it off. But when that is applied to boys and young men who haven't developed, who aren't mature, and who don't even necessarily know how to handle that or respond to it, that's going to have tremendous effects on their well-being and on their sense of self. And what a lot of boys and young men today are basically told is that they are less than girls. They are less than women. And they need to either be more like girls and women, or they need to even become girls and women. And what I'm trying to say in this new book, The War on Men, is that is exactly the wrong move. What we need to do, instead of telling boys and young men not to be strong, is to tell them in God to be strong, to grow up, to mature, and to change by God's grace.
Absolutely. Well, so what in the midst of all this, as you're trying specifically right now, and all of us in our own different ways, trying to call men back to masculinity, back of being the person God created them to be in the midst of all this gender confusion that we're facing these days. What are some of the major misconceptions, shall we say, or maybe misunderstandings of masculinity, things that maybe you point out in the book that would be helpful?
Sure. You've got, for example, the American Psychological Association saying in a 2019 report that being aggressive, assertive, taking risks, being emotionally tough, all of that is part of traditional masculinity ideology, which is harmful and bad for men. And what you have to do, Jody, when you hear reports like this is say, with all due respect, that is nonsense, because men need to be trained to be assertive, aggressive, take risks, and be emotionally tough in certain settings. Can men not be as emotionally developed as they should be? Absolutely. Does the Bible call men to be understanding toward their wife in 1 Peter 3, for example? Yes. So every man is in a lifelong project of learning to be kinder and gentler and these sorts of things. But here's the thing. The Bible also says to men that we need to be tough. We need to act like men. 1 Corinthians 16:13. David says to his son Solomon, be strong and show yourself a man. 1 Kings 2:2. So the Bible says that to men, and men need to hear it, and we need to help boys hear that call well and live it out by God's grace.
Yeah, we really do. I love what you're doing, Owen, and all this. You know, the definition you just gave, let me just go down this path. The definition of masculinity that you just gave, a biblical definition, really is swimming upstream from society's definition. Kind of just briefly explain the difference. What would be society's definition of masculinity?
Honestly, I don't think society really has a definition of masculinity that's operative anymore, other than maybe men in some cases have a vague responsibility to love women and children. But beyond that, Jody, I'm not comfortable saying anything that our culture would believe in and emphasize in a hard and fast way. Our culture and society wants boys and men to leave behind their innate wiring, their God-given traits. It tells boys and men that those traits are antisocial. In response, our culture says, by the way, girls have social tendencies. Girls listen well. Girls are empathetic. Girls are inclusive. They bring people in. And so, for example, in the business world, there's now been several years of this model of the inclusive and empathetic CEO who isn't like the old patriarchal CEO who makes decisions and runs the meeting on a rope. But no, this CEO is inclusive and brings everybody in. There's all sorts of ways that men can listen well and as I say, be warm and welcoming, but fundamentally, we're not calling men to be women. We're not calling men to be boys. We're calling boys to be men, but to even say that kind of line today is going to put you in the cultural penalty box. We can't worry about that, though. We have to call boys to men, or else this whole project we're in, it's all coming down.
I could not agree with you more. I think that's well said. And really, I guess when it comes down to it, society's definition would probably include some attempt of feminizing men these days. And of course, the outcome of that has no good end. I know that you're aware of Riley Gaines, former collegiate swimmer who competed against a man in the NCAA swimming championship. And as you well know, she recently spoke at our Pray Vote Stand Summit. And there was a point that she made that I'd really love for you to comment on. If we can, let's play clip 4, please.
There's no doubt in my mind we're in the part of the process now where weak men have created hard times. I think the last time we had a society full of strong men is in the 1940s during World War II, when men were lying about their age to enlist in the draft. And now we have men lying about their sex to get into women's sports.
Oh, what a contrast. Give me your response to that.
That was fire. That's my technical theological response. That was some heat. She's throwing 1-on-2 on the radar gun. She's exactly right. Men now are trying to get into women's sports in my native state of Maine. There's been a lot of news recently about a cross-country runner, of all things, who's now used to compete in the guys' side and now is competing in the girls' side, and went from something like 172nd place on the men's side in the state to 4th on the girls' side. And what we just have to do as Christians, Jody, is we have to lead out, and we have to not leave it to the pundits out there who say some good things to take a stand here. We as Christians, we as Christian men have to stand up and say, no man should ever go into a girl's restroom like this man, William Thomas. He is not a woman. His name may be Leah Thomas technically, but he is a man, William Thomas, has done for girls. And no man should be competing against girls in these sports. And what we need to recover as men is that protector role among men. But so often when men show that protector instinct today, when men show strength of any kind, they're penalized for it. We want to shape the strength of our young men and boys. We want to train them in the gospel of Jesus Christ, but we absolutely are calling boys and men, just like us who are weak in ourselves, to be strong in God, and we're never going to stop calling that.
And just as you're saying, Owen, the battle here really goes far beyond just a sports issue. We're not just talking about men competing in women's sports or that type of thing. This is an attack on the character of God. This is an attack on the creation, the order, the roles, the complexity and differences of male and female, which ultimately are an attack on God itself. And that in itself indicates this is all driven demonically. It's driven by spiritual forces. This is much more than a sports issue, I guess is what I'm saying. How do you take that and communicate it effectively?
You're exactly right. And there's no way to communicate this outside of spiritual categories, Jody. We're not, as Christians, called to try to rationalize everything down for the broader public so that they'll listen to us and give us a hearing, because we're not really Christian when we talk in the public square. We can make great common sense arguments and arguments from sound thinking that we should and do. But fundamentally, we're Christians. We're not supposed to be a Christian on Sunday morning in how we talk, and then basically a functional unbeliever in how we talk on Wednesday. We're supposed to talk like a Christian on Sunday morning and Wednesday afternoon and Friday and everywhere in between. So what we need to do on this kind of issue is we need to say, I'm not just for boys being men and girls being women and not crossing between them or going into the opposite sex bathroom. I'm here as a believer in the Lord Jesus Christ. I know that God created this world, and I know that God didn't just create the dirt I walk on. God created men and God created women. There are only two sexes. There's only one vision of marriage. It's one man, one woman for life in ideal terms. And I'm standing for all of that. And I'm doing so explicitly because of God's inerrant word. And I'm here, furthermore, not to hate you. I'm not here to hate you. I'm here to speak the truth to you in love. And if you're trapped in this ideology, I'm here to bring you out by the grace of God. And I pray that God will do that for you.
Great point. This is not about hate. It's about truth. It's about reality, and reaching out to help people grasp that and understand it has to be the right approach, and understanding the spiritual nature of this whole thing as well. So, what are some of the consequences of weak male leadership in society?
Well, you alluded to this a few minutes ago. Jordan Peterson has talked about it in a common sense kind of way. But when you tell people that we need a safer society, A, and then B, you tell them, so the way to get the safer society is to have men stop being toxic and strong. C, what you end up with is not in any way increased safety. You end up with increased danger. And so Peterson has been a voice against that. And he has said, in his own way, no, men need to be dangerous. Men being dangerous doesn't mean men going out and randomly attacking women and children. That's terrible from my Christian worldview and from his worldview. But men being dangerous means instead strength under control. It means that you have the capacity to defend yourself and to defend others when that is needed. You need to see yourself, if I can borrow this from the movies, as a sheepdog, as a man. You may not be the biggest, muscle-bound bench presser out there. I'm not. But you do take your God-given body in a 1 Corinthians 9:27 sense, and you subdue it, and you try to turn your body as much as you can into a weapon against evil. And you not only do that in a physical sense, you see that as your calling. That's why you're there. You're there to be a sheepdog. You're there to protect sheep against the wolves, because there's never going to be a way for you and me to be nice enough for the world to be absent of wolves. The only way you can face down wolves is to stand against them. And that's what men are called to do in the church and outside of it.
Incredible discussion. Oh, and unfortunately, the clock is ticking down. I want to play one more clip from Riley Gaines at the Pray Vote Stand Summit. Play clip 5, please.
We can only hope that these hard times garner strong men, but parents, as you're defending your daughters, teach your sons masculinity. Teach them to be strong men. Of course, teach them to uphold and respect and honor women, but teach them how to be strong men.
That's what you're just saying.
That is literally the message of my book, The War on Men. I hope to meet Riley Gaines at some point and talk with her, whether that happens or not. You're exactly right. I'm trying to do my small part. I'm publishing this book. I'm calling men to strength. It's not strength that comes from us. This isn't a self-fulfillment project. It's not self-help. It's not therapy. It's not the manosphere. It's not Joe Rogan. It's not Andrew Tate. It comes from God. It comes from Jesus Christ himself. And so that's the message, and that's the mission, to take men who aren't doing well in a lot of cases, men who aren't necessarily growing up, men who don't necessarily have a purpose or a script, and say, through the gospel of grace, you can become something greater than you are.
Dr. Owen Strand, fantastic book. Where can people buy a copy of The War on Men?
The best place is still probably Amazon, despite all their mischief. So Amazon drives things, and that'd be a great place to go to get it, or Barnes & Noble, or one of those big box sellers out there.
Thank you so much for joining us on Washington Watch, and thank you for writing this incredible book. We appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
All right, friends, that wraps up yet another edition and another week of Washington Watch. Thank you so much for joining us. We've had a lot to cover this week, but don't ever forget, greater is he who is in you than he who is in the world. Hope you have a fantastic weekend. We'll see you next week right here on Washington Watch.
Washington Watch with Tony Perkins is brought to you by Family Research Council and is entirely listener-supported. Portions of the show discussing candidates are brought to you by Family Research Council Action. For more information on anything you've heard today, or to find out how you can partner with us in our ongoing efforts to promote faith, family, and freedom, visit TonyPerkins.com. Also, to leave a comment about Washington Watch, call our watch line at 1-866-372-7234. That's 1-866-372-7234.